Good afternoon and welcome to the Savage Chamber of Commerce Meet the Candidate Forum with Lindsey Port. I am Heather Prosky, the president of the Savage Chamber of Commerce, and I would like to extend a welcome and a thank you for being here today to Lindsey. Lindsey is running for a seat in the Minnesota Senate District 56, which includes Savage, Burnsville, and Lakeville. Lindsey, hello and welcome. How are you today?
Hi, Heather. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. So just to give you a little bit of heads up here, we're going to make this super conversational, just having a nice conversation, nice dialogue about just a couple questions I have to ask you. So we're just going to make it really, really flowing and fluid and just kind of go with the flow from here. So thank you again for being here. Would you do me the honor and just provide a brief introduction of yourself, some history of your past political experiences and or accomplishments, both elected and your volunteerism?
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for tuning in. I'm Lindsey Port. I'm running for the Minnesota State Senate for District 56. I've been active in the district for about 9 years now in politics. I got involved first as a volunteer on the marriage equality movement and just showed up to my first phone bank and fell in love with the idea and work of talking to voters. And I kind of just got bit by the bug and never stopped. After that campaign, I volunteered on then Representative Will Morgan's campaign, and I ran for the House myself on the B side of the district in 2016. After that, I started a nonprofit that supports and coaches volunteers from the communities who often are really the backbone of running these legislative races. It's really our community members that run these races. And so I run a training organization that helps people learn those skills on how to help their own candidates in their own districts. And then I recruited Hunter Cantrell and Elise Mann to be our wonderful representatives we've had these last 2 years, and decided it was time for me to get back in and run myself this year.
Fantastic. That had to have been a big decision to take a leap of faith and try this on a pandemic year.
It sure was. I decided in November of last year, and so none of us, I think, expected this year to look quite like it does. But that's the nature of the world, and that's the nature of politics too. You never know quite what you're getting into, and we've had to just roll with the punches this year.
Right, that's the operative word for the year. Just roll with the punches, go with the flow. That's absolutely it. Lindsey, can you talk a little bit about your nonprofit and starting your nonprofit? Because the Savage Chamber is a nonprofit, obviously, and we're supporting the Savage businesses here in the community. But talk about getting involved with a nonprofit and where your headspace was with that, and kicking it off and being successful with it.
Yeah, for sure. When I had this idea of having been on campaigns and then been a candidate myself, I saw how much of the work, especially at the legislative level and the city level, city councilors, school boards, things like that, these races are really run by your neighbor down the street who's going to be your treasurer and your core friends that build out your campaign team. These are run by our community members. And often that means that we don't have any formal training in campaigning or the work that's put into it or the policy experience. And so I wanted to make sure that training was available. And the key for me and the reason we made it a nonprofit was because we wanted it to be available to anyone who wanted to make use of our tools. I think often, there are very expensive consultants who will tell you how to do these things, but that limits who can run for office and who can be successful in office. And so for me, it was really important to be a nonprofit and be focused on that training and education, because we want to open the doors for people who don't come from wealthy backgrounds or, people of color, women, people from the LGBTQ community. Those are kind of the candidates and staffers that we focus on.
Absolutely. Yeah, near and dear to our hearts. We love nonprofits,
Yeah.
so that's great. Lindsey, talk to me about what you have done in the past to influence the way government operates.
Yeah, I've since I got involved working, I think like the heart of what I've done is increase voter engagement. And like I've worked a lot with people who want to get more involved and done a lot of education and coaching and training around getting those folks from our communities to be citizen lobbyists, people who bring the concerns that we have at our kitchen tables to their legislators and make sure that their voice is heard and they have a way to push that through. I think that's kind of the most important role that we have here. But I also think that one of the other things that we've done in this realm is by making sure that we're holding ourselves and our leaders accountable when we don't live up to kind of our expectations of what our leaders are. And in 2017, I spoke out against a member of my own party who had sexually harassed me on the campaign trail. Because I think, when we try to go through the correct ways to report things like this and stuff like that, it doesn't necessarily lead to the outcome that we need. And so at that point, I had reported all the right ways and nothing had happened, and I knew it was still happening to other people. So I spoke out publicly. And I think like that's a thing that we need leaders who are willing to call out, even when it's our own leadership or our own party, that we're not living up to the expectations of voters and the public. We need to be willing to do that.
That's great that's a brave, bold move for you, Lindsey. Thank you for letting us know about that. And that's it's quite an accomplishment on your side for sure. So talk to me about, you referenced voter engagement and you've been very proactive with that. How has your campaigning from a year ago November to today changed with the current state of our country with COVID and pretty much anything else that we could come up with that's happened this year? How are you getting your message across? Obviously this forum is nice to have, but it's just one part of probably your whole campaign plan for the year. So tell me how you've kind of been out there doing what you're doing.
Well, I think like everything else this year, it's been a challenge. We had a plan, and obviously we weren't able to just execute our plan like we were hoping to. We aren't able to have big events. We aren't door knocking folks, trying to keep everybody safe. But we have, been creative because of that. One of the, I guess, positives of a virtual campaign is that wherever you are, you can pitch in and help. So I have a lot of friends who are moms because I have 2 young kids. And so there's a lot of moms who, couldn't necessarily come to door knock or phone bank for 3 hours, on a Thursday night.
Sure.
But they can do 2 hours in the afternoon. And so because we have everything's virtual and you can just always plug in, they're able to be more flexible with that idea. So I think it's made it more accessible for more people to join us, and which is great. We also have incredible organizers working in our district. We have some great leaders in our district who are organizing our Spanish-speaking community, and have helped us do some forums and video forums and things like that, to make sure we're connecting with those voters. We have incredible organizers in our Somali community, who are, again, we've had some roundtables with Somali mothers and what are their concerns in education and how are we addressing those issues. We've been able to find those ways to make those connections, but it is, like everything else this year, it's a challenge. It's not what we expected. I'll say that for sure.
No, but you've obviously made lemonade out of those lemons we've all been handed. So good for you.
That's the goal for sure.
Yes. Lindsey, if you could write, sign, and pass 3 laws today, what would they be and why have you chosen those 3 as your passion project?
Sure. I think the first one I would say is a Minnesota Care buy-in. This is, I think, super vital to me, both as a person who has bought our insurance off the exchanges for many years. My husband owns a small business and I run a nonprofit. So like we don't have, you know, healthcare through a big corporation. We've had to buy our own, which I know a lot of small business owners are struggling with at this point. And the way we've seen those costs just skyrocket, we pay almost twice as much for our insurance as we do for our mortgage, which is just outrageous.
Wow.
So being able for my family and lots of families who buy that way, I think that being able to buy into the Minnesota Care program is a really important first step. But I think it's also a really important first step for small businesses to be able to buy into it as well, because I know we did start at my nonprofit in our third year. This last year, we started providing health insurance to our very small staff. And it increased our bottom line by 30%.
Wow.
So it's debilitating for small businesses to try to provide these benefits. That is really what helps us keep our best employees. It's hard to keep employees when you're not able to give them those benefits that they can get at bigger corporations, and it stifles that spirit of entrepreneurism that we want in our communities. So a Minnesota Care buy-in for both individuals and small businesses, I think, is the number one thing we need to do. It's also like this is a pandemic year, and we've seen thousands of people lose their jobs in our community, and with it, their health insurance during a pandemic, which just simply can't happen. That can't be the way forward. So that's probably the first one. The second one, I think, is to go back. We used to do this, to go back to fully funding education at the state level instead of pushing it back onto our communities to pass these levies and referendums and increasing our property taxes year after year to pay for that. The state should be taking that on fully. And I think we've really seen in our community, which is divided into multiple school districts, the disparate impacts that can have when some schools are really able to keep up their enrollment and able to pass levies and able to do more, and other districts are struggling to get by. And so if we can move that funding back to the state level instead of pushing it onto our communities, we can really make sure that no matter what zip code kids are in, they're always getting that world-class education that we're so proud of here in Minnesota. And then the third one, I think, is really just like we need to take action on climate change. We have the Minnesota House has twice now passed a 100% plan, which gets us to carbon neutral by 2030. I think now it's pushed out a few years because the Senate hasn't even had a hearing on it. They won't even hear the bill. So we need to get that passed. Governor Walz is already on board. Those are things that we can do right away that help bring jobs to Minnesota by building a green economy and making sure that we're doing the things that we can to get ourselves to carbon neutral and help slow the climate change in our area, but also, can create an economic boon in a time when we're really looking at substantial job loss across the state.
Those are excellent platforms there for sure. Do you have a wild card at all that, just want to throw out there and say, let's see if we can make something happen on this platform?
Yeah, I have two.
Oh, wow.
One of them I think is not maybe really a wild card, but is just absolutely necessary, is the ban on conversion therapy. It passed the House. It didn't get a vote in the Senate. We know because psychologists and psychiatrists tell us that conversion therapy is a harmful, it's essentially torture that's state sanctioned for our children. It needs to be banned in Minnesota. We have the support to do it. The Senate, again, just wouldn't hear the bill. Hunter Cantrell has been a fierce advocate for that as our representative here in Savage, and I would very much like to see his bill across the finish line. And then the other one is in Minnesota, there's a line in our statute about sexual harassment that says it has to be severe and pervasive before it is a crime. And so it's incredibly hard to even get someone fired for sexual harassment, because if it doesn't rise to the level of severe and pervasive, which what that means is super up to whoever's hearing the case or who's ever prosecuting the case, it doesn't, there's no penalty for it. And so being able to remove that line, I think, from the statute is really important in getting safer workplaces for all Minnesotans and justice for people who have been harassed in their place of work. And businesses all across Minnesota are on board with this because they don't want the liability of having people who make their workplaces unsafe in their boardrooms and in their break rooms and offices. They want to be able to remove those people as well. They just don't have a legal argument to do so right now.
Well, thank you for bringing all of those issues to the table for the voting public. I mean, they're all definitely timely topics right now that we're all hearing. So,
Yeah.
Lindsey, talk to me about how should the state of Minnesota balance the concerns between public health and the economy right now? And what role should the legislature have in that process? I mean, this is a huge topic right now, is that we're dealing with a pandemic, but businesses are closing. So how do we balance this, and how are you going to help that?
Absolutely. It's a huge problem. Obviously, like, we are in unprecedented times at this moment, and we need to make smart, careful decisions, but we need to look at them holistically. The best way that we can get businesses back up, that we can get our economy moving again, is to get the pandemic under control. And so I am a fierce advocate for the mask mandate that the governor has put into place. It's the most science-driven way that we know to keep this pandemic under control. And the more that we can make that just a part of our daily lives, the faster that we can get the pandemic under control and can get things opened up. I am a mom of young kids. My husband runs a business. I run a business. We are both mostly working from home, and our kids are half-time distance learning from home. So I know there's a lot of families in this like limbo place where it feels impossible to do your job and also impossible to be a great parent at the same time. And that's just, it's unsustainable at this path. So we have to get, this pandemic under control so we can get our kids back to school full time, so we can get businesses open. I think that's the number one priority. The legislature absolutely does have a role in this. The governor's emergency powers are so that we can move nimbly and quickly during an emergency, which we are undoubtedly in. There are still hundreds of Minnesotans dying every week, and we need to make sure that we are, controlling that number and getting it down as much as possible. This is still an emergency. You can look across the country. We're over 200,000 people dead from this now. The President of the United States has it. Tons of people in the White House have it. This is still an emergency. We still need to make quick action. And because Minnesota does not have a year-round legislature, we need the governor to keep those powers while the legislature is not in session. And we've kind of seen over these last 4 months, when they've come back for special sessions, they've not come back to negotiate anything, or haven't been able to come together and pass even a bonding bill. So I don't have a lot of faith that the legislature has been up to this job without the governor keeping those emergency powers. I do think moving forward, as we get into our next legislative session, we are going to have to take really hard looks at how we're going to help our cities and state bounce back. I know cities are going to be under incredible pressure with their budgets, and because the state has been hit so hard during the pandemic, there's not going to be the availability of legislative aid to cities that we've been able to do at times like this in the past. So we're going to have to be creative and work together with each other. Hopefully we'll have a federal government that can, pass another package of stimulus relief and pass that legislative aid, or that state and local aid that really our states desperately need from the federal government. But we have to look for a path without that, because we can't plan on it right now.
Okay, so I'm going to throw a wild card at you then too, because it wasn't the question that I was going to ask, but Minnesota is facing a projected budget shortfall of $2.4 billion for the biennium ending July of 21. So if we're not open and we have this budget shortfall, how are we going to get over this? How are we going to overcome all of the rising unemployment numbers and all of that, give me some helpful hints to pass on to the voters of like, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, even though we have these gigantic numbers of shortfall in front of us, but there's businesses closing and people still on unemployment, like you just referenced, not having health insurance during a pandemic.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a tough couple of years. Like, there's no doubt about it. But I think that this is a time when we make smart investments. The state can, through bonding bills, by buying bonds to pay for them, make these big investments in statewide infrastructure projects that we have needed to be done for years, and we know they need to be done. They're all across the state, and they can provide really good, sustainable jobs for folks in the short term to get us through the next couple of years. And they can also be huge investments in, a new green economy, in solar, in wind, in all of these things that can help us make changes on climate as we're doing them. But we are absolutely going to have to pass a big bonding bill to get people back into work. We're also going to have to, I think, pass additional stimulus relief for small businesses. There is no way for small businesses to get through this on their own, and they shouldn't have to. Opening access to healthcare to help remove some of those costs, being able to expand unemployment benefits is going to be really important as families are starting to really face incredibly difficult decisions. But as they're facing those, they shouldn't be having to choose between, are they going to pay their rent, or are they going to, get their prescription that month? Those shouldn't be the decisions they're making. And we need to make sure that Minnesota Care is open and available to anyone who wants it so that they don't have to put those choices on the line. We are going to have to, I think, look at raising revenue. And what that means can be anywhere, again, from buying bonds, increasing the bonds that we're investing in. And it also can be increasing, large corporation taxes or taxes on the top 2% most wealthy Minnesotans. What we need to be looking out for is those folks that are barely making ends meet right now and that won't be able to keep their businesses running for another 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks. I know that's how, like, my husband and I, when we look at our small businesses, we don't look 15 years in the future. We look 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 3 months in the future. And I know a lot of small businesses are like that. And those are the folks that we really need to be focused on helping through this.
So Lindsey, give me your light at the end of the tunnel. Give me your positive message for the voters. 30-second closing statement with a great message of positivity and, moving forward into November 3rd. Go for it.
Absolutely. I am still optimistic through all of this, even through 2020. I think we get to choose right now our path for the next decade. We get to decide who we want to be. And I think we are a community that cares about each other. I think we're a community that wants to invest in education, in the entrepreneurial spirit of small businesses, and that sees that the more that we work together and build together, we can really build a future for Minnesotans that we're proud of. We have 27 days left.
Right?
I think it's 27. We have 27 days left until Election Day. Though please go early vote, vote by mail, vote any way you feel comfortable. And really our choice now is to make ourselves heard and make sure that we have a voice in this election and that voice doesn't end the day after Election Day, that you should be building relationships with me, with all your elected officials, because we are not just going to St. Paul to be a voice for ourselves. I'm going to be a voice for our community.
And Lindsey, do you want to give us some ways to contact you for these, public messages of need and support that they can send your way?
Absolutely, yes. If you visit lindseyportmn.com, it's LindseyPortMN.com, lindseyportmn.com. You can reach me directly through our contact us link, and you can see any events we have coming up, phone banks, text banks, things like that. It also gives all the different ways that you can vote and links to voter registration, to absentee ballot applications, and all the hours for anyone in our district who wants to go vote in person at this point. Heather, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely, and I'll put my plug in on the side here too, is that the City Hall is open every day for in-person early voting, and there will be numerous in-person voting opportunities throughout Savage on Election Day, plus, like you just mentioned, the mail-in option and voter registration. I think we have a few days left for voter registration online, and then voter registration day of Election Day in person is still an option too. So if you haven't registered to vote, there's still a few short days before Election Day to get that done. But yes, get out and get your voice heard for sure. Lindsey, thank you. Good luck on the virtual campaign trail these days. But yeah, please be safe and be well. And thank you for your time today. Is greatly appreciated.
Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you to everyone listening and watching.
Absolutely. Bye-bye now.
Bye.